Welcome back to the big question tonight. We're asking, is national dialogue necessary? Of course, in studio tonight, I'm joined by Beatrice Elachi, Majority Whip, Senate. Thank you so much for making time for us. And Dr. Chris Omalo, Deputy Minority Whip in the National Assembly. Thank you so much for making time for the big question. Let's just refresh your memory. Dr. Chris Omalo will tell us if these are still some of the issues. They gave us a 13-point agenda. This is some of them because obviously we can't fit all of them because of time. Disbandment and replacement of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Some of the things God was talking about. Review of taxation rates to lower the cost of living. Stoppage of corruption or ending corruption. Wastefulness and government heavy borrowing. They also talked about immediate withdrawal of KDF from Somalia. They also talked about solutions to raging insecurity. That problem still going on, but of course efforts have been made to try and alleviate that. Implementation of the TGRC report, land reforms, and a minimum of 40% of annual national revenue going to the counties. An ethnic audit of the public service. Things one was done recently. Like we said, we can't capture all of them because of time, but thank you so much both for making time for us. Let's just look at some of your tweets before we start the debate here. On Twitter, engineer Mike Kelvin says the government should embrace talks with court. Dialogue is healthy and will benefit Kenyans. At Etiang Eli Emod, national dialogue is a great necessity. However, leaders must not politicize the issue. At Brian Murimi, no, national dialogue is not necessary. Leaders should be able to find solutions to problems without calling for a national dialogue. And at Nguine, dialogue should not be an event but a continuous process. On 22422, Solomon Bivot from Kisumu says no, there is no need for national dialogue as we have the National Parliament and the Senate who can attend to national challenges. The court principals are playing games. We do not need their so-called advice. Jubilee is capable of ruling Kenya. And Victor Ijaika from Vihiga Hussein, welcome back. Kenya needs responsible leadership. We have big challenges from insecurity to corruption that require strategic dialogue by the people. Before we go on, Dr. Chris Omalwa, are these still the points you want dialogue on? Has anything changed? It was 6 months ago.
Okay, yeah, it's true. Those are the things we want. But as time goes by, circumstances are changing, and you're likely to add more. For instance, the issues of the teacher strike is there. So, aspects of dialogue, you are discussing issues which are controversial, issues which are bringing discomfort.
Teacher strike, for instance, is just
absolutely recent. Yeah, it's just recent. But
what does that mean? Every time?
As time goes by, when issues, you know, when you talk about dialogue, you dialogue on issues which are controversial. And affecting Kenyans.
So what you're saying,
for instance, right now, the teacher strike is indeed affecting the children.
Yes.
So we must come together, have a dialogue, and see what is the best way forward that we can sort out these issues by involving all the critical stakeholders so that our children can be able to go back to school.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me get this straight. What you're saying then is, even after, if they decide to have dialogue with you tomorrow for the next 2-3 weeks, something else comes up in the next 1 month or two, you'd also call for a dialogue on that?
No, what I meant, Hussein, is this. This was a proposed agenda for the dialogue.
Okay.
But as time goes by, when we sit together, we are likely to have amendments.
Okay.
Yeah. So it doesn't mean it is static. It is likely to change depending on the circumstances prevailing in the country.
Honorable Elachi, we've seen some members of the Jubilee, including Majority Leader Adan Duale and others, talking about the calls for dialogue, having the members of CORD having ulterior motives, trying to get into government. Quoting him, actually, he said the Nusum Kate thing and coalition government again. Why don't you trust what they're calling for as dialogue?
I think maybe it's the way CORD has always presented its dialogue. And I think the most important thing now CORD should put on the table in 2015 is to tell the country whether indeed the dialogue we've called in for 2 years is real dialogue for Kenyans, or is it dialogue for the leaders within CORD? Because I think that's where we get confused. And being in government, you will never refuse to do dialogue with anyone, because you're in government. You can't fear anything. But I think what we've always and consistently continued reminding CORD is that when you talk about dialogue, you don't polarize the dialogue on different platforms that are not supposed to be platforms for calling for dialogue.
Right.
And what CORD has done, they've taken advantage of when people are in that sudden situation where you think about country uniting itself, that's when they remember, look here, we want a dialogue. We talked about security. We've now said we have security. We've had a new person who has come in, the CS Ngaiseri. We'll give him time. So there's no way we'll come out now here and
Talk
say
about
now
security.
we want to do dialogue about security. And at that time, those were the issues that were coming up.
Yeah.
But more importantly, for me, as Beatrice Elachi now, 2015 as leaders, I think political leaders are very interesting people. And I'm sorry to say that, Hussein, today. That we look for ourselves first. And I think the dialogue that has been there, and that's why we have never achieved dialogue, is in all circumstances, just when things are ripening up to have that atmosphere and a conducive environment to do dialogue, we, the same leaders, just come in and we close out those gates and we become a very different character, an animal that you cannot sit on one table and discuss again.
Okay, let me get his response.
Thank you, Sen. First, I want to salute His Excellency the President for accepting to have dialogue with CORD. And one important thing I want to point out is, as CORD calls for dialogue, by the way, it's calling for other stakeholders. It's not just the CORD leadership. It's looking at issues of the religious leaders.
Okay.
All these issues is all inclusive. And one thing I want to put across is, if you're in power, why should you fear dialogue? Two, I want to give you a story of a certain professor in Harvard Business School, Professor Peter Drucker. This is a professor who invented modern management, and he came up with a technique called management by objective. And this is a technique whereby stakeholders come together in terms of decision making, in terms of looking at the critical issues that are affecting. When it comes to implementation, all of them go and implement in a motivated manner.
Okay.
And what we want, what CORD is trying to look at, issues of security. We can't say by Ngaisari coming, the security issues in Kenya are over. If we talk about the issues of corruption, these are the things that are affecting every Kenyan, whether you're Jubilee, whether you're in CORD.
Okay, let me just take you a step back. I don't know if we have a clip of President Kenyatta. We don't have that. But he said...
He has no problem with that.
He has no problem
Absolutely.
with that. Does that amount to accepting?
It doesn't amount to accepting. It amounts to where do we appreciate that we need that dialogue? Because at one point, he comes out very clean. He says, look, I have my clean hands. Let's have dialogue. CORD comes in with gloves, and then they'll one time and decide, okay, we want dialogue with ultimatums. And I think that's one thing the president has said. Honestly, if it's dialogue, and for me, I want to ask CORD today, is it dialogue for the agenda? Because when you look at the agenda of government, the government has to ensure, because it's the government in place, that we have development, we have everything going on. For me, the dialogue I'll wish now CORD and Jubilee to be talking about is dialogue of bringing this country back to where it's supposed to be, one united country. And I think that's what we have lacked.
Now, I want to respond to the issues of Honorable Dwale by saying that CORD is demanding to have a Nusumkate. I don't think Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga is interested to come in the government to say, I want to be a minister or whatever the case.
Right.
So, to me, that one is unfounded and we should not look at it that way. To me, what I want the Jubilee government to notice is that the CORD government, I mean the CORD coalition, means very well.
Okay.
And coming together, I mean, Hussein, when it comes to issues of dialogue, even the Bible says this. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 18. It says, come together. Come together, let's reason together. I don't see why we should be fearing the issues of dialogue.
I think the thing dialogue,
the issue of Nusumkate does not arise at all.
He was being very honest.
I don't think so.
No.
Why would you say
the majority leader was
why
being
should you
honest?
say that they want to
Because, I mean, from the word go, 2 years down the line, you've really called for dialogue. You've talked of the agendas. But these agendas, nobody critical with objective eyes has come out and say, as much as we've looked for dialogue and we are not sitting down with government, you can still sit down with stakeholders, the religious leaders you've talked about, and do this same dialogue.
Although they accuse you.
For me, Duale was just being honest. 2015 leaders, let us be honest. And it's an honest matter.
Hussein,
maybe the Nusumkate was not the right way of saying it.
Absolutely.
But
that
it's
was
just
very wrong and
we have
demeaning.
leaders who really believe when you're in government, you'll have what you want, you'll have the little advantages that you have.
Now that you say maybe the Nusumkate is not the right way of putting it.
Maybe.
Absolutely.
Let us play the clip now of President Kenyatta during the funeral service. That is last week. We'll start with Kalonzo Musyoka and what he said. Let's have a look.
Is it difficult, if we truly loved Fidel, for us as a nation to say 2015 we shall follow this young man's example of dialoguing and sit together and ask ourselves some basics rather than having to fight each other in parliament, in the courts of justice, over matters that we can, as Kenyans, very ably sit together and discuss.
And I want to give you my assurance that I am personally willing, and I have no issue whatsoever in sitting down and talking and bringing people together. There is no problem. All we need to understand is that we need one another, and we need less of shouting at one another and more of talking with one another. Talking with one another. And that was what Fidel was very good at.
Right. We saw that. I'll come to her first. Now that you said maybe the issue of Nusum Kate shouldn't have been said, there's almost a disconnect here, and people have pointed that out, including Kalonzo Musyoka. Later on, he was quoted as saying, it's not really the president. There are other people or hardliners, or what the president says sometimes is not what the Jubilee MPs and senators do the next day, like we have seen.
It's both sides. When you hear Honorable Raila speak, he comes out also very well. With, I mean, you will feel he's willing to come on that table and speak. But the hardliners around him will do the same.
Okay, but if you don't mind, I agree with you completely. Yes. But if you don't mind, can you answer for Jubilee the question?
Well, for Jubilee, I don't see any hardliner. For us,
you don't understand why sometimes he says he's willing.
Where it went wrong again is they used a different platform to just destroy the whole trust that we had just gained at that. I mean, look at what happened in Kisumu. Then you come back the next day and say you want dialogue?
Is that why you think there was a change of heart?
Yes.
Okay.
Because, I mean, that respect has to be there when we are talking of that dialogue.
As you respond, Dr. Wamalwa, they also have a point with the president saying no ultimatums, no shouting.
No shouting, no abusement.
We've heard Senator Wetangula, for instance, saying before we dialogue, let the Attorney General withdraw the appeal on the security laws. Dr. Khalwale talking about first, let's sort out the teacher strike. You've said it yourself. Those are ultimatums, aren't they?
Now, first, you've seen what the president has said. And I'm hoping Mheshimiwa Honorable Senator will confirm that the president is willing. He has confirmed, I am willing, I have no problem with it. And we salute him for that. The only problem that the Jubilee government is facing, you know, when you discuss the issue of change management, some people are resistant to change because they're not assured of their positions, maybe. And those are the hardliners.
But you don't see a problem?
I don't see any problem. As code, we've not given any ultimatums. And as I
no, listen.
There are no ultimatums.
In public.
I wish you could play some of those
there are no ultimatums.
There was
no ultimatum. If somebody is expressing, that is wishful thinking. But we cannot say, listen, we cannot say that's an ultimatum. If we come together for the dialogue, we are going to have a clear framework. We are going to have the nomenclature. We are going to have the structure. We are going to have a time frame.
Okay.
Those are proposals, but once you sit together, you can amend and both parties can agree. So there are no ultimatums whatsoever.
That is fine.
Yep.
What has been said before? You saw what happened in Siaya, for instance. What does that amount to when somebody says, before we have dialogue, let's have this and that? That is not an ultimatum.
Okay.
Because that is what they're talking about.
First and foremost, Hussein, code is an institution. And before any decision is made, leaders come together and agree. What Honorable Senator Khalwale was saying, that is his opinion. But when it comes to the same table, we discuss, we amend. So as far as I'm concerned, there are no ultimatums.
Okay.
If you heard what Rosemary spoke about, the daughter to Prime Minister, she spoke very well. She said we come together without ultimatums. And we have no ultimatums. It's only that we have a proposed schedule of activities that we need to look at. And as they come on board, we are going to amend them accordingly. When you agree on the way forward with a clear terms of reference, with clear framework, with clear structure and nomenclature.
Okay. Let's try and move this forward now. What format then do you want as CORD? Because you've been talking about this dialogue for a while. What format do you want this dialogue to take?
Now, And this is
How
my
should it be? Is it a,
and
is it a
this
conference?
and
is it
this
a
is
seminar?
this is
it-
my proposal.
Yeah.
Once both parties come together with other stakeholders, the civil society, the church, once you come together and you look which are the critical issues affecting this country, aspects to do with corruption, aspects to do with insecurity, aspects to do with maybe food production for that matter, okay? We put them together, then we discuss and agree. What are the terms of reference? We are using both parties. We're not dictating that this is the way forward. Once we've come up this way, we can go in form of a conference. For instance, in Nigeria, President Goodluck actually brought parties together, the political class, the issues of the ethnic classes, the issues of the church together, and they developed a framework which they agreed upon that made the decision in terms of the way forward. So CODE has not come and demanded that this is a clear framework we're going to say. We come together, let's agree, let's reason together and see what is the best methodology that we want to use. If it's a conference,
Who should come?
let it be.
Right. Who should come together? I mean, who should initiate it? Where should it start? The president?
Of course, the president.
would
As I gave
Raila
an
or-
example of Nigeria, Nigeria is President Goodluck who actually initiated. And this is the president of everybody in this country.
Okay.
So he must
get a
drive the
response.
process. After he has initiated this, he called our leaders. Prime Minister Raila Odinga is there, just like the way we did with Agenda 4.
Okay. Let me get a response.
I think the most important thing is that the framework should start with political parties. And I think why I say political parties is because in the end of the day, when we go on these platforms, we use our political parties either to give wananchi what we think is the best, or to decide how to polarize our country, or even to decide how you can finish the country. Because when we say we want dialogue, and CODE, honestly, with your agendas, if you say anything that comes out, it means you don't have an agenda. It means you are waiting. Whatever comes in that has an issue like teachers, then that is an agenda. You carry the agenda, you move on with that agenda.
All
I think
right.
that will not be the right way of saying we want to have dialogue.
I'm coming back to your response in a short while. We're taking a short break on the big question. We are asking again, is national dialogue necessary? Talk to us on 22422, text us on Twitter using the hashtag the big question. We're back after this short break. Welcome back to the big question we are asking tonight. Is national dialogue necessary as called for by the CORD coalition? Sami from Cherengani says, yes, the country is bleeding from inside. If our leaders are patriotic and love Kenya, then they should embrace dialogue. And I have somebody else here, Solomon Biwot. This one I read earlier. We'll look at more on Twitter and on 2242 again. Talk to us on Twitter and 2242. Text us, Twitter, using the hashtag the big question. Our guests, like we told you earlier, Beatrice Elachi, Majority Whip in the Senate and Deputy Minority Whip in the National Assembly, Dr. Chris Wamalwa. You were supposed to respond.
Thank you. Hussein, Article 10 of the Constitution is very clear. This article talks about the national values and the principles of governance. And when you read that article clearly, issues to do with patriotism, issues to do with unity, issues to do with the participatory are highlighted. So if His Excellency the President is going to accept this issue of national dialogue, he's doing it in line with Article 10 of the Constitution. Again, world all over, we've seen many leaders coming together. And the President, as the Chief Executive Officer of this country, it is his responsibility as the CEO to provide leadership and establish a framework whereby this dialogue can be
Is it up to the President to provide the framework like he says?
No.
Absolutely.
I think it's upon all of us
It
leaders.
is all of us, yes,
All
but
of us
he's the
leaders.
one to
Not
accept
His
and
The
call
format,
a forum
the format
to
of
come.
how
The
this
format
dialogue
has to
should
be participatory. Both
His
sides have to
Excellency
agree.
the President is
to
the CEO
accept.
of the country.
Yes.
He has one agenda: to see the country move, to unite the country, to ensure development is in that country and his people are secure. Now, when you come in and you say again, already he has started dialogue. When he's doing these things, the first thing, he must communicate to Kenyans. He must move with Kenyans. That's dialogue. Now, for one, leaders come in, political leaders especially, when you come in and you say you want dialogue with the President, who is already doing his duty, he moves out, dialoguing with people, ensuring what we asked him to do, what he pledged to this country. I think His Excellency the President is doing that with his deputy. Now we must go back and sit and reflect, and CORD must reflect this time, ask themselves, ask CORD, as an opposition, are we there critically to ensure we have an opposition that checks this president as he dialogue with 40 million Kenyans. Now, what we have lacked is when we come in and bring different interests. And I think as leaders, we have different interests on our table. And that's where the lack of dialogue and understanding, Kenyans really understanding what type of dialogue do political leaders want in this country.
Do you agree with what they're saying, and maybe some sections of this country, especially those supporting CORD, that there are challenges that need dialogue? Do you agree with that?
We agree with that. As a government, we agree. And so as I say, Hussein, we've always agreed. We have never disagreed as a government that we need to sit down as Kenyans to look at issues that affect us. But the challenge we always face, and I say the moment the environment comes out as we are ready, something just comes in and happens.
Just 2 days ago.
Politically, we come again and we polarize.
I'll give you time, don't worry, I'll give you time.
We polarize the situation and then we go back to our own cocoons. And that's why I was saying dialogue must start with political parties. Because that's where we use a platform to either abuse that dialogue or move with that dialogue.
Thank you, Hussein. Hussein, as I said earlier, the president is willing. But we have the headliners who are there. Maybe they are threatened of their positions, but I want to confirm that the CORD leadership is not interested whatsoever in the issues of Nusumkate or to threaten those positions. What it's after is for the welfare of this country. It is indeed true, she's accepted that this country is bleeding. Matters of insecurity. You've seen the teacher strike. We've seen so many issues. She's agreed. But what is so difficult with agreeing to have a dialogue with CORD? And by the way, CORD is not just saying CORD alone. He's saying we involve other key stakeholders like the church, like the civil society. You are in power, you have instruments of power. Why are you getting threatened and yet your leader himself, His Excellency the President, has accepted? Let's have a team together. Let's have a clear framework. Let's have a structure. Let's have a nomenclature. Let's discuss the methodology.
But we have agreed. We have agreed, Chris. What you have ended up doing is maybe have that fear that when you come to Jubilee and dialogue,
that you'll take over the positions.
You'll find most of your members realizing, oh, look here, we have a government we can work with. And maybe that's the fear. And that's why always your key leaders will always come out with ultimatums. But as government, why should we fear?
Absolutely.
If you are willing, if the government you've said, the president has said is willing, even before he said that, you're saying the Jubilee coalition is willing.
We are ready.
You're willing.
We've always been
I think the question people have been asking is the next step. And that is what I've been
propose.
Let me propose. What you're proposing is what CORD is proposing, I think?
No. This is my, my opinion. This is my suggestion, but it can be discussed and improved on.
Who should start it?
What should be done? The president, he's the CEO of this country. He has said he has accepted. So what we do, we can have a representation. Just look at Agenda 4, what happened. When we had 4 from this side, 4 from this side. We can start these discussions by having either 4, 5, or 10 from the other side that is agreeable. Then as we sit on the same table, we look at the terms of reference. First, we identify what are some of the critical issues that are affecting this country that we need to come together and reason together, just like what the Bible says. After we've outlined these issues, now we'll discuss the methodology. How are we going to proceed? There are some issues which will go in terms of parallel, others will be in form of series, so that we come up with a product. Then this product will discuss and implement it.
Now let me give our time as we wind up
now.
The
key word from CORD is terms of reference. That's where it goes wrong. Because in dialogue, you don't have terms of reference. You don't have a framework.
Let me simplify maybe the meaning of terms of reference for my sister to understand better.
The most important thing we should ask ourselves, and that's why I said the dialogue 2015, we must be asking ourselves as leaders of this country, is how do we ensure we stop polarizing Kenya?
If they stop, if you're saying they are doing,
all of us.
All leaders.
And, and I think in His Excellency's speech, he said, I would wish we have a country where we can unite, talk to each other, but don't threaten each other. But now when CORD again comes and tells the president, we have our terms of reference, and we are thinking this is the methodology.
Let me simplify what I meant by terms of reference.
We have to wind up. We really have.
I think maybe Senator is misunderstanding the meaning of the phrase terms of reference.
I mean, terms of reference
means, from I want to simplify so she understands better. When you talk of terms of reference, first, we look at what are some of the critical issues. Okay? We identify. If it's security, maybe inclusiveness. Once we identify that, we discuss what is the methodology? What is the composition of the people in the dialogue? That's what it means by terms of reference.
composition in the terms of reference.
Yeah, terms of reference has many issues.
You go back to your agenda 4 where you think...
I give an example.
We have a government of the day in the House.
So in all fairness, you have the Jubilee, the government of the day.
We don't have terms of reference when you have a government.
So what format would you suggest?
What format
if you're saying you're willing for dialogue?
Dialogue is we sit down, all of us as Kenyans, and we sit and we ask ourselves, where do we want to go?
And those are terms of reference.
No.
Yeah.
Your terms of reference. With an example of Agenda 4, Chris.
Through what? Like, that is why I'm asking what format. For example, and Kamau from Gilgil is asking this question as I wind up now. Saying national dialogue is done in Parliament, National Assembly and Senate. The other types of dialogues can be done outside Parliament by non-parliamentarians.
Parliament is not dialogue.
All he's saying is that why can't you... what they've been saying, their existing institutions, are you still holding on to that? Is that what you're saying when you format for dialogue?
How did we dialogue in 1997?
Now, let me give you the limitations of the institutions that we have. Okay? The institutions we have...
Okay, you give me your final remarks.
Yeah, let me give you the final remarks. But before I do the final remarks, the limitation of the institution that we have, we cannot have the civil society, we can't have the church in Parliament. So that is the limitation. So when you go for dialogue, it's going to be all-inclusive. Okay? We are going to have the civil society, we're going to have the church, we're going to have political parties. So it's all-inclusive. Parliament is limited. I hope my sister is understanding this.
No.
So the way forward, my remarks is, and this new year, I'm looking forward to see a united Kenya, a peaceful and secure, that we are going to move in the same direction, void of political differences, void of ethnic differences, void of religious differences. And thank you, Mr. President, for accepting. So call us together. Let's have terms of reference. Let's understand the methodology. Let's move forward and know what is the output. Thank you very much.
We have an institution in Parliament. It always gives the framework of dialogue. I believe that's where it starts, because that is where the political leaders are and representatives of Kenyans. Number 2, 2015, as we move forward, if CORD really wants dialogue for this country with the government, come to the table, clean hands, dialogue will be there. There is no way. But you will not use your own political platforms to abuse the president, to give ultimatums of dialogue. I don't think that is what Kenyans want to see. And from now onwards, can we respect the dead and make sure when we are burying our dead, we bury them with dignity?
Honorable Beatrice Elachi is the Majority Whip, Senate, also nominated Senator. Thank you so much for coming to the big question. And Dr. Chris Wamalwa, MP Kiminini, also Deputy Minority Whip in the National Assembly. Thank you so much for coming to the big question. Keep talking to us on 22422. Text us and on Twitter. I don't know if I'm supposed to look at some tweets right now. Yeah, let's look at some feedback on Twitter. At Mr. Dofa, conversation rules the nation. We need relevant dialogue. And at Maverick Nyambu, leaders should be able to put differences aside for the sake of the nation through constructive dialogue. At KV Rob, the call for dialogue is politically motivated with lots of ultimatums. CORD is taking us for a ride. And at Ben Osiako, national dialogue is not necessary at this point in time. Dialogue will solve nothing. Again, talk to us on 22422. Text us or on Twitter using the hashtag #TheBigQuestion. We take a final break before we come back with Janet to look at your tweets and business news.